Patriotism to Canada is, of course, very welcome, and your success in your provinces as well. And I have a big apology to make to you, because although it was brought to my attention that New Brunswick accepts out-of-province political donations, so does Saskatchewan. And I'm sorry, but I didn't know that. I just checked because I was curious, and sure enough, it does. So again, we should all want to support these good, solid premiers that are showing leadership across the country and having the guts to fight the destructive Trudeau government. So again, I would encourage anyone that feels that way to contribute to the political fortunes of these two great premiers who are here tonight. And I think they're both facing challenges after you've been in power for a couple of terms. As we all know, things get a little tougher. In any event, I would now like to invite Anthony Furey to introduce our Game Changer Award winner East, Premier Blaine Higgs. And Anthony Furey, by the way, our next mayor of Toronto.
Thanks so much, everyone. Great to see you again for the 5th annual CCMBC Gala. Looking forward to being here for 6, 7, 8, and many years to come under Catherine's leadership here. And I want to take a moment to just recognize a couple politicians who are just joining us now. I'd like to recognize Mayor of Brampton, Mayor Patrick Brown, if you can stand up there. Mayor Brown, thank you. And Toronto City Councillor Parthy Candival, welcome. We just heard some great remarks from Premier Moe on what the pathway can be to turn things around, what leadership looks like, and how to bring about much-needed change. Because I think we all agree we need to bring a change in policies and positions to the federal level. It'd be kind of nice if we could bring some change to the Toronto area, to the greater Toronto area. I understand if you want to talk about how long the drive took for you to get here. There's a complaints line forming behind Minister Sakaria there. But Minister Sakaria, we're looking forward to all the projects that you're working on to get Ontario moving and jobs moving. Because it's such a shame. It used to be that when you're at a social event, you say, how are you? I'm fine. You talk about the weather. Now, you know this to be true. You say, how is your drive here? And that's like the opening line now that we have in all our conversations. But I know the government's building highways and transit projects, and Minister Sakaria's on that case. Premier Moe on the case on a number of files, and our next guest, who I have the distinct honor of introducing, on the case on a number of files as well, to show us what leadership and what vision looks like and what's possible all across this great nation of ours. Before entering politics, Blaine Higgs had a very successful career as a senior executive in the Irving organization. Then he moved on to public service, running for office in 2010 with the New Brunswick PC Party. He was appointed finance minister of his government at the time, and then went on to run for leader in October 2006. They were in opposition at that time. But Premier Higgs became Premier Higgs in 2018, leading a minority government, 2 years later going to the polls and winning a majority government, being popular with the voters there. As Catherine said, there is an election this year in October 21st. But when we think about what success looks like and what positive policy changes mean, some of the highlights of Premier Higgs' time in leading his province include 6 balanced budgets. Taxes did not go up, taxes went down. And to date, nearly $2 billion have been paid off from the debt that previous governments had racked up. Now, Premier Higgs is also a staunch defender of exporting Canadian energy from his market into other markets all across Canada and all across the world. An important thing that we need to do, not just for New Brunswick, but of course the whole country. And one policy that you've heard of a few times here, and I see it's the policy that's getting the most applause lines right now. Premier Higgs became the first premier in the country to speak out on the issue of parental rights and introducing a policy that said if minors identify to the classroom that they are transitioning. The policy of hiding that from the parents was reversed, and now the parents must be notified. Blaine Higgs and his wife Marcia have been married for over 40 years. Marcia joins us now. Say hi, Marcia. They've been married for over 40 years. They have 4 daughters and now 5 grandchildren. It's a great honor for me to be able to introduce and to give the Game Changer East Award to the Honorable Premier Blaine Higgs.
You know, listening to Scott and talking about all these great things going on in Saskatchewan, it's pretty exciting, and you know, some of it's true. These people, and I have firsthand knowledge of that, and that is, my daughter and son-in-law live in Moose Jaw. Now, what's with that? She's a family physician, and he's a cardiologist, and I'm absolutely sure there'd be a position for them in New Brunswick. But they seem to be getting roots there and like it very much. So I have firsthand knowledge. Yeah, that's right. So the other thing is, I just want to say what a pleasure it is to be here tonight. And I really mean that. To be in a friendly audience. Has anyone read the headlines back home? It really is a pleasure, and I am enjoying this conversation, and I'm enjoying the meeting we had earlier, and the chance to be kind of aligning across this country. The story for me is I did have a lengthy career within Irving Oil Limited, 33 years actually, and I retired in 2010 and thought, you know, I'd like to do something different. So the first election, I got elected. I was actually nominated in the spring, got elected in the fall. So that was my summer campaigning, and during that time, my wife, we had our last daughter was graduating, and so I was campaigning, and Marcia was getting ready for the graduation, and I said, you know, I could use a little help out on the campaign trail. She said, well, our daughter's graduating, and we get this all, you know, done. We'll kind of think about that. I said, well, it'll be all right. I don't need to, you know, if I don't get elected, I said, there's things we need to do around this house, and things I've been putting off for a long time, and things we could change, I think, and I listed a whole bunch of stuff. And she said, I don't need you around here all the time telling me what I need to do around this house. So you talk about a lady that got involved in politics and started campaigning door to door to door, signing people on the dotted line before she actually would leave the house. Some said, look, if you please go. If your husband's only half as good as you say he is, I'll vote for him. But leave. We've had enough. Catherine Johnson, I just want to thank you tonight. Having this honor, it is indeed a pleasure. You know, coming from a small province, but coming from a province that I would say today is punching above its weight. If any of you read a book a while ago, there was an economist that back 10, 15 years ago wrote a book about New Brunswick going over the cliff, headed for the cliff. We don't know what's going to bring New Brunswick back, demographic challenge, and all these, that there's no hope for New Brunswick. Now, he's still an economist. But now he's changed his whole tune. Now, he wouldn't write a sequel. I wanted him to write a sequel. He wouldn't do that. But he actually has put forward a strategy that I should spend more money. So these economists, you've got to watch them, because if you don't like one opinion, get the opinion of another. But what did we find out in New Brunswick, the opportunities that we had? My goal when I ran was about the big picture. Can we have a better province? Can we have a more secure province? Can we have people moving back because they were leaving and going to Saskatchewan? Now they're coming back, mind you. So that was a goal. And I got to say, in all sincerity, though, Scott, when I first got elected, I was coming in as cough chair because I was replacing the premier that was cough chair. And I joked around a lot because if you remember, if you know anything about that election, when I ran on a very modest platform. Our budget in the province at the time was around $12 billion. I ran on a $100 million expenditure plan, and I was told you'll never get elected. My opponent ran on a $1.6 billion spending plan. He didn't get elected. Because our province needed to have more straight talk, a path forward that would get us from not running over the cliff, and how could we change the focus. I was fortunate to be in a riding, middle-class riding, but they were looking at the big picture too. So running on that, now he didn't leave easily. It was the first minority government that we'd had in 100 years in our province. And I joked around a lot because my desk is all scratched because he hung on desperately. It took us 5 weeks to determine who won. And when he and I met, and he was significantly younger than I am, I haven't really aged that much. I've always been this old. It was actually, he said, well, Blaine, I congratulate you on winning your riding. I said, well, Brian, I said, I won more than well, he said, what's a few seats here or there? I said, well, it's the difference between government and not government. Oh, well, we'll work through this. And I said, no, there'd be no working through it. I said, it's going to be pretty straightforward. So it was, and we had our first minority government. And it was a challenge, but I had alignment with one of the parties there that really we focused and we worked together very well. And by the way, it wasn't the Greens and it wasn't the Liberals. They later joined our party. COVID was a challenge, but in all fairness, it was a challenge and something new for every one of us. And you look back on it and say, wow, would I ever want to go through that again? Absolutely not. And I certainly wouldn't want you, in the court there giving me a hard time. And then congratulations, by the way. It was a time when we were all trying to say, what's the best thing to do? And we were just trying to protect each other. And it was a learning curve for every one of us. So where have we gone as a province over the last 6 years? So we did get reelected and we in a majority government in 2020. But what have we done over the last number of years? So the last 3 years alone, our population has increased by over 10%. We were stagnant. We were stagnant in our province for generations. But we kind of started even to decline. Our average age was going up. Our average age is coming down now. I'm not necessarily helping that, but we've gone from 46 to 45, average of 45. And that's because of new students. Our schools were closing 4 years ago. We're opening new schools. We've had a population in about 10% of young people in our schools. So it's not people just come to retire, but a lot of people are coming because they're finding, that this is a great place in New Brunswick. COVID, I call it the COVID bounce sometimes, because during COVID, we had the Atlantic bubble, and people discovered the Maritimes. Many people, that live in big cities thought, well, maybe I'll look at a little different lifestyle as they were maybe retiring or whatever. But what we found is people came and looked at New Brunswick for the first time for a long time. We don't have people leaving in droves now. We have people coming back. We have schools growing. We have a situation where we've had job growth, about 28, 30,000, but for a province our size, it's significant. And it's exciting. But even with all of that, you meet with somebody and they say, my wife and I had dinner with a young couple that we never met before. One was a doctor, one was she was a nurse practitioner. And she said, I was telling them about all the great things happening in the province. And they said, well, I hear what you're saying, but for me, everything's more expensive. So these are, moderate to high level income, but they said everything's cost more. Housing's more, groceries are more. And when I tried to explain that's the federal government, So housing is going to be the issue for us, which we never had. We've had a 30% increase in housing costs, and everybody thinks it's great when they actually sell their home, but they don't think it's so great when they go to buy another one, or the tax bill comes in. And this is a whole new audience, so I can tell this story because we have one daughter that lives in the province with her husband and two granddaughters. So they sold their home about a year and a half ago, and they were going to move into a bigger home. And so they looked around, they couldn't kind of find what they want. So Marcia had a great idea. She said, well, look, we're not in our house very much. Maybe you'd like to move into our house, and you can stay there until you find a place. So that was fine, that was good. And we come home, and they're there, and the kids are roaming around, so it's kind of exciting. So then about 5 months went by, and I'm thinking, they haven't found a new home yet. Well, they're not looking. You make life too easy, so they don't look. So then Marcia has another idea, because I get all my ideas from Marcia. She says, their furniture's in storage, and they need the room. It's in the friend's garage and such, and they need the room. Do you think there's I said, so what's your point? I was a little slow on the uptake. And she said, well, we could put our furniture in storage, and they could move their furniture into our house. I'm saying, well, who wins on that? Oh, well, the kids, could have their... So guess what? Our furniture and storage, she sends me a picture of our life in a box because it's all stored. And they're in our house. So when we go home on a weekend or whenever, we are assigned a basement bedroom. We have kitchen privileges, and we have our own bathroom in our own house. So it's quite unique how we are helping, family, but that is what family's all about. He's a Red Seal carpenter, and he's building a little place outside the house. I said, what's that about? Oh, he said, you'll know soon enough. Tiny home. So that's what kids are for. But that's what families are for. So why do we stand up for families? Because that's the very foundation. I was asked, well, with all the things going on, why did you take this position? With all this upheaval, why did you take this position on the transgender issue and pronouns and such? And I said, I've been at this 14 years. This will be the single most important thing I will have done during my entire career here in politics. And it's surprising that we had a policy that actually would hide information from parents. But it didn't come easy, as you know. I had 6 of my colleagues revolt. It gets a little tense, We had a good majority, but it got slimmed down pretty fast. And of course, they voted against the government in a motion, and we moved the cabinet ministers out. But it has been a tough year. So you can imagine how, I couldn't throw them all out of caucus, because then I'd be throwing myself out of government. So you kind of think, well, okay, we've got to think this through. So we went through the year knowing that they wouldn't vote us out of government because they didn't want to lose their job. So we carried on, we passed what we wanted to pass. We dealt with the things we wanted to deal with, most of them. And but caucus meetings were a little strained, the events were a little strained. But that's what it is when you decide to take a leadership role or make a difference. And when we look at democracy in our country, so when I think about, when I was as finance minister for 4 years, in 2014, then I won my seat, but we didn't win government. I was in opposition. And then midway through that, I ran for leadership. But I wrote a little commentary about politics as a business unto itself. And I don't think there's a party that demonstrates that more clearly than the Liberal Party. I truly believe they have a business model of how to stay elected. How do they capture votes? What demographic do they appeal to? And what can they do? And every time they go after people that work long and hard hours to make work for others and make a living throughout your communities and drive change in your communities, people say, well, that's great, I can stay home and everyone here will pay for it. And that's what we're up against. We're up against a philosophy of staying in government. Not a philosophy, not a commitment, not a drive to be better, to make things work, but to stay in government. And how sad is that? So when I think of what needs to change and why we're still at this, and because it is a team effort. It's a team effort supported by Marcia and at least 3 out of my 4 daughters. But it's good to have diversity within your own home, right? We can have a really good discussion, and this oldest daughter, she's a great debater. But it's a discussion, it brings new viewpoints, it brings good challenges, and then we go on to our family life. There's no carryover. And that's the kind of policy we need to have. So what do we hope happens through all of this is that people get their voice. The silent majority, as people often talk about, are no longer silent. They actually say, hey, I too can speak up. And you don't know how many people, and it's very encouraging to go down the street, go anywhere, and someone say, well, thank you very much. I appreciate you standing up for parents and parents' rights. But say it out loud. Say it to people. Write a story. Have a group together. Make people feel comfortable in challenge so many things that have been normalized in a society that continues to erode. And that's what we're up against. So when I think of how do we change the game and why are we still trying to do this? So yeah, we've had 6 balanced budget. We will continue to balance the budget. But it's because we won't overpromise on election time. We had 20 years of 4-year cycles in election. When I first got elected in 2010, we promised everything to everybody. And I was running on fiscal accountability even then. And I would come home at night and I'd say, what is this? Because we promised freezing the property tax for seniors over 65. Imagine. And then I called the office. I said, what's this about? And because I heard it on the radio. And they said, oh, no, we got it all figured out. Had no idea what it's going to cost. Not a sweet clue. So when you think about the promises that are made, the promises are made riding by riding by riding. And what do I need to promise in this riding to get elected? I had one of our candidates during the campaign that said, hey, I've got a picture here, a photo up, all set up in your bus stops, and it's of the bridge here we're going to replace. I said, what bridge is that we're going to replace? Well, the one we're going to take a picture of. I said, well, we're not replacing any bridge. Well, he said, I'm running on replacing that bridge. I said, well, you should run for someone else because we're not replacing the bridge. I had a guy leave caucus, call me one Saturday morning, said, you know, I want a commitment from you to replace that bridge. And I said, you have a commitment, you'll always have a bridge. You will never be without a bridge. And we will keep that bridge in excellent condition. And when the engineers say, I'm an engineer, by the way, engineers say it is no longer suitable to be a bridge and we must replace it, we will do it. He said, that's not good enough. I need to know right now or I'm going to cross the floor. I said, where do you want to sit? He said, no, I'm serious. I'm crossing the floor. I said, I'm serious. Where do you want to sit? And I remember this so clearly. It's a Saturday morning. I'm sitting on the Chesterfield. And anyway, he did cross the floor. So it's not easy. Scott alludes to it's not easy being in politics. It is not easy. But you have to have the resolve that, well, if I'm here, I'm here, and if I'm not, I'm not. But you do what you believe is right, and you don't give up on it. And there are compromises. There are compromises that are reasonable that people need in ridings. There are community things that you accept and you do. And that's part of being representing their communities, because communities need our help. But the idea is that you do what's reasonable in order to maintain the bigger picture. So what are some of the 5 things? So for us, it was getting balanced, paying off the debt, not raising taxes. What is it on the economy? Our economy is growing. We have an LNG plant sitting there idle. We have huge resources of gas. And when the Chancellor was here and went to Newfoundland talking about hydrogen, I'm listening to the Prime Minister talk about, oh, we're going to be shipping hydrogen to Europe, Chancellor, in 2026. 2026. We wouldn't be sending a bottle of hydrogen to Germany in 2026. But we would be able to ship natural gas. And we would be able to cut back on your demands or your needs from Russia. So here we fund the Ukrainians by about $600 million a few months back. And then we allow sales of Russian oil and gas. And when I was at a hydrogen conference in Europe, they said, we cannot believe that a country like Canada that has such strong natural resources is not giving us any assistance whatsoever. Just talk. It's embarrassing. Absolutely embarrassing. So we need to get our energy security back. It's not because I came from the industry, because I know it's an industry that we need. When I met with Total Energy in France, they had 4 or 5 major pillars, and they said fossil fuels will be a major component of about 25% of world energy by 2050. They said we know that wind and solar will continue to play 20-30% role over time, but there needs to be backup for much of that. And we know, they said that we know that nuclear is going to be a major component, and we're very focused. Scott mentioned that. We're working together on the next generation nuclear SMR development, along with OPG, Ontario Power. And then they said, but our goal is to develop as much natural gas, LNG shipped around the world as possible. And we will shut down every coal plant that we can find gas to supply it. And doing so, we'll reduce emissions by 50% on that plant and have more of a world impact on emissions than anybody else is having. So how easy is that? And we sit on these resources that could be supplying the world, and we let it go dormant. So let's just say a year from now, a little more, the dormancy is over, and we start becoming the powerhouse that we can be. So what excites me, and I won't carry on too long, but you're all fed up, you're in good shape, you're relaxed. I've traveled across the country, and it's for a small province like New Brunswick to have an opportunity to speak to an audience like this, to speak with my colleagues federally in Alberta, in Saskatchewan, and in Manitoba and BC. It's a humbling experience. Because the first time I see our nation starting to pull together. But you know what we can't take in isolation? And I'm not saying this, Catherine, because you just identified that we'll accept outside donations. Well, maybe I am. But I probably need it worse than Scott. I should say that, right? But the point is, we can't be satisfied with what happens in our own backyard. For the first time, Conservatives need a consolidation of purpose. We need a message that young people look at as this is the future, not the hype that is created without any sort of background of how we get there and with any sort of scientific evidence of a path. And that's what I'm seeing happen. And the demographics that we see in the federal meetings, Polyev was in Fredericton. I went to he spoke at an event that I had, but he came to, he had a big event, must have been 1,100 people there. But what was so impressive was the demographic, the 20, 30-somethings that were there. So we are capturing, I'll say we, Polyev is capturing that younger demographic that are starting to think, okay, how does this work again? So young families that can't afford a house, what's that about? Young families that can't afford to, fill up their car with, what's that about? So, and then of course we have the ongoing challenges in healthcare. The three issues, affordability, housing, and healthcare, are going to be the election that I'm fighting. So it doesn't matter how well the province is doing. It doesn't matter we haven't increased anything in terms of taxes. It doesn't matter if we're dealing with issues that have been left on the table. Affordability, housing, and healthcare. And it's a nation issue, but right now you'd think it's only in New Brunswick. So I just want to say again, it is an honor for me to be here. Let's work. I think we have consolidation of purpose. I know from the beginning, and dealing with Scott and dealing with Jason Kenney previously, and now Danielle, we've been aligned right from the beginning. And I said earlier, I think maybe I have some Western roots. I'm not sure. We'll do a little DNA check. But that son-in-law that's drug my sister away, or my daughter, that's still an issue. So I just say, I'll leave it at that, say thank you very much. And we have a campaign. That's another thing we've done differently. I guess I'm used to adversity. When I ran for leadership, I only had 2 colleagues that supported me. But you know who supported me? Were people that got involved that had never been before in politics. That's what we need. We need people of all ages, but especially young people, to get involved and say, oh, I can't do this. But no, you can do this, and get them to get out and be part of a solution and part of the future. Steve Outhouse, I think many of you know Steve, and he's had great success in other elections. You talk about the records you've had here. Steve's had a pretty good record too, so I kind of held him to that. I have it in writing, guaranteed outcome. But he's been a breath of fresh air coming into our midst. He brings a whole new philosophy. We are now creating our own media because the media is of no value to us in their current form. So thank you for the award. Thank you for the opportunity to speak here tonight. And thank you for all being aligned for our future of our country.